I love calling her the grand dame of the whole contact experience because she has history. She's worked with thousands of people. She is truly has a huge overview perspective about this. Anything you want to say, Sheila, Neil, Joan?
Well, I could do a little bit of a formal bio and talk about it a little bit.
Oh, yes,
so
please.
whoever doesn't know. Okay.
Yes.
So Barbara Lamb is, go ahead, Sheila, what were we saying?
I was just going to say, I'll do a little informal before you do the formal.
Yeah. Do you want to do informal too? Are we doing a four-way?
Well, it's
We are
kind
ahead
of
of schedule.
interesting. We mentioned Glastonbury and the conference, and that's where I first met Barbara Lamb, and she was taking us on a crop circle tour at the crop circle conference at the same facility we're doing our conference.
Right.
So
That's very interesting, yeah.
It's very, very interesting. Who knows what she might say about that? So I'm always happy to be on a panel or even to talk to Barbara.
I have to say, I met Barbara for the first time coming out of a crop circle in somewhere near, where was that? In Wiltshire.
So she could have been an ET coming through a Stargate.
Barbara. She could have been an ET. She could have been she could have made the crop.
Maybe.
So that was when she landed on Earth in that moment.
Right.
Well, let me do the formal bio first here, okay? And so we can do an unofficial one. So Barbara Lamb is a specialist in regression therapy, having been trained for several years in the 80s by the Association for Past Life Research Therapies, which is currently called the International Association for Regressional Research and Therapies. For many years, she had assisted people by conducting regression therapy, taking them to the original source of their problems and concerns, which sometimes includes revisiting significant events in previous lifetimes. In 91, she began working with ET experiencers, people have encountered ET beings. She has counseled and conducted regressions of more than 1,400 of these people, totaling at least 3,000 regressions. 25 of these cases are included in her book, Alien Experiences, a collaborative work with writer and illustrator Nadine Lelich. And she's a teacher in the ufology department of Online International Metaphysical University. And then just my own personal connection with Barbara. A lot of you probably heard me say this a few times, but she was actually one of the headlining speakers at our first ever conference in 2012. So right when Portal to Ascension first started doing big events, I had a connection with Barbara, and our connection and friendship and the collaborations have grown ever since. And she's had the ability to really watch us from doing these small events to where we had. And I've also just had ability to really see her dedication when it comes to the subject matter. That bio right there isn't even a fraction of the depth of how deep Barbara even goes. Barbara truly is dedicated to the craft, that she is at the front row sitting there all day, right? A great story of this kind of experience was in 2019, Barbara attended, our conference in Irvine as an attendee, just because, she's in California and she attends a lot of our events. So she was sitting there the front row the whole time. One evening, it was like, I don't even know, like 10, 11 o'clock. Barbara had been there the whole time. And then she comes out, and I asked her if she'd eaten, and she hadn't, because she literally was there the whole time, glued, and didn't want to miss one thing. And that's just like, to me, so we actually had food and like went and got her a plate and all that. But to me, that really really struck with me, the dedication that Barbara had, that not only was she in the front row, but she wouldn't even leave. She was glued to her seat with her notebook, taking notes, really connected to the individual experience of each of these people. And that's why I love working with her and just love her as a person, because she's just such a beautiful soul and a friendly person on top of that. So that's my intro for Barbara.
And you're looking better and younger than ever, Barbara. You're revitalized. Beautiful. Unmute yourself, so we don't want to miss a word.
Well, that was really fun to hear that particular introduction. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, you mentioned many of the things, and there's much more to share too, but I'm not going to take up time to do that. So my talk today, as I am thinking about it, is to sort of bring us back to the ground level, shall we say, back to human beings and what we human beings may know about hybrids without being a hybrid. And I would like to say that I am not a hybrid myself, although I have known many, many wonderful people who are hybrids. I totally trust that they are. But I did have a very interesting experience back in 1983. I was part of a workshop where a wonderful woman named Dr. Helen Wambach was doing past life regressions. And I had not gotten into that part of my therapy work yet at that time. But anyway, in the workshop, we had 6 different regressions to 6 different lifetimes. And then toward the end, she said, any of you who would like to know what your true soul purpose was or is for coming into this lifetime, raise your hand and we can do that. So of course, my arm just shot right up. Of course, I want to know why I'm here. I had always up to that time wondered, what is this all about? I mean, why am I here? Why are any of us here? What's the reality behind all of the physical reality that we live in? Even when I was first beginning to talk, I used to tap the furniture and the windowsills, which were very hard, and ask my mother, what else is there beyond this? Now, she had no idea. Very wonderful woman, well-educated, but she had no idea why I was asking questions like that. But the questions continued all of my life and still do to this day. But thanks to so many of you this weekend at this wonderful conference have really filled in the gaps and expanded and opened so much more than I already had about reality and the different dimensions and the different beings and the different purposes for going on. So anyway, back to 1983, when I was in that regression to what was the main reason why I came into this particular lifetime, what came up immediately after going through why I would choose to be in the white race and grow up in America and be part of this culture and choose the specific family to be born to and the family members that would be there that I would be with and so forth. So after all that, then Helen Wambach said, okay, now be aware of the main reason, the main purpose for your even making that choice to go into that lifetime. And immediately, without a moment's hesitation, I knew that I was going in to help people to understand how it really is. And what I meant by that in 1983 was that existence is full of these conscious souls who take different turns going in and out of lifetimes. But like it was like the atmosphere was absolutely chock full of conscious human souls. And not only that, but I had a sense that in the background, sort of like behind all of these billions of human souls, there was another enormous, even a larger group of intelligent, sentient beings who were sort of human in form in a way, but they were not human. Now, in 1983, I had no sense of the reality of what we now call extraterrestrial or star beings. Back then, I thought anything to do with UFOs or extraterrestrials was all science fiction. But here I was having this profound soul experience in the regression of being aware of billions of them. And I was to let people know about that whole aspect of reality. So took a couple more years before I found a way to get a few years of regression therapy training and took me even more years, about 8 years in total, until the first person came to me for a regression about her extraterrestrial experiences that she was having, and unfortunately was very traumatized in having. But I found that I could work very successfully with her, and very helpfully she got past all of her fears, and she actually had developed a love for these unusual beings whom we consider at that time aliens or extraterrestrials. So basically what I'm going to talk about today is about the ET human hybrids. And that is very much from a human point of view, to even give them that particular label. So most of my work has come through doing the hypnotic regressions that I've done with, I've probably done at least 5,000 regressions now to people who experience extraterrestrial encounters. So that's a lot of material. Plus, I have done long interviews with quite a number of them, and 8 of them appeared in the book that I co-authored with Miguel Mendonça called Meet the Hybrids, the Lives and Missions of ET Ambassadors on Earth. And that's indeed what I do consider these hybrids. They are wonderful ambassadors from the star beings to us humans here on Earth, and what a wonderful service they are giving. So then I've met many people at the UFO conferences, which I've gone to many of. And at many of those conferences, I led experiencer support groups. And that was an opportunity to meet many people and to hear their stories of their experiences or what they're wondering about, these unusual, anomalous things that were happening. And amongst those groups, sometimes there would be somebody who was talking about being not only an emissary for some of the star beings, but being a hybrid themselves. So I certainly became very interested in that subject. And in the meantime, in doing many regressions, especially in the 1990s and early 2000s, I was aware of many people who were having hybrid children. And in most cases, those hybrid children were not human enough in proportion to live here, and therefore they had to live on the ships. And these people would see their hybrid children from time to time when they would be taken for experiences on the ship. So many of the women, for instance, whom I was regressing, would talk about some of their experiences meeting with a hybrid child when it was even in a tank, gestating before quote unquote birth. And then they would be taken again when the baby had been taken out of the tank, what we would consider being born, and they would hold the baby. They would be asked to hold and nurture the baby. And then they would be taken when the baby was about a year old, and then 2 years old, and 3-year-olds, and so forth. So some of the women I was doing regressions with had already been doing this for a number of years, and their hybrid child might already be in his or her early 20s. But in all of those cases, they lived on the ships. And it was told again and again that there would be no way that they could survive here on Earth, even if sometimes the mothers really wanted them to be here and wanted to raise them. But they would not be able to stand our viruses and our bacteria and our ways of living, our food, our digestive systems are different. And so they just could not be here, nor would they be accepted here, because we humans can be very prejudicial, unfortunately, and we would not receive them kindly in so many cases. So they have to live on the ships with the beings and see their human mother or father sometimes from time to time. So anyway, I was very interested in those hybrids, of course, and wondering more and more about them. And they became more and more human in proportion with each succeeding generation. In other words, a hybrid would be combining with another human, and out of that would be born on the ship another hybrid who would be 2/3 human and 1/3 extraterrestrial, and so on through the generations. So some of them are much, much more human-like. So that was a whole fascinating subject in itself. And it did not occur to me that there might be hybrids living on Earth until it was about 2008 or 9 or so that I was at an international UFO conference and serving myself mayonnaise for my sandwich on a kiosk in the hallway. And someone came up next to me and I turned around and looked at her. She looked at me, a woman with beautiful, really big eyes, bright, sparkling eyes. The rest of her looked completely human. But I was so taken by her eyes that I said, oh, and she said, what? You know, like, why are you reacting to me that way? And I said, well, I hope you don't mind my saying this, but you remind me of a hybrid. And she smiled and she said, I am a hybrid. That woman was Cynthia Crawford, who is one of the really excellent, wonderful hybrids who lived here for many years. Unfortunately, she passed on just a very few years, probably 3 or 4 years ago now. And but she did all these wonderful sculptures of the extraterrestrial beings whose genetics she carried, and whose these beings whom she visited many, many times on the ships, and they would sort of channel through her and give her direction as to how to model these sculptures of beings, of their kinds of beings, and many different other kinds of star beings, including the other beings who had also given her their genetics. So then at another International UFO Congress about 2 years later, somebody brought over to me a woman for me to meet. And I took one quick glance at her and I said, oh, you remind me of a mantis being, not knowing if I would be terribly offending her or not. But she was not offended. She smiled and she said, oh, good for you. I am a mantis being. I am from Estigan, one of the planets that houses mantis beings. Well, I got to know that woman. She's from the East Coast, but she came out to visit me for a whole week. And I took her to a conference put on by Neil Gower, and he had a chance to meet her and give her a chance to talk at that conference extemporaneously. And anyway, that was a wonderful experience. So my framework about hybrids living on Earth really increased, and I came to know more and more people who were identifying themselves as hybrids. So it happened that I was invited to a couple of different weekend gatherings. One was out in the Palm Springs area. I think that was the most recent one. And that was in about 2014, another one in 2015. And at those gatherings were people, regular people. I call us regular people. If we're not hybrids, if we're not extraterrestrials, if we've not even had experiences with them, although in parentheses, I will say I have 4 notable extraterrestrial experiences myself that I have been aware of. But I've not had them all my life. I'm not the typical experiencer. But anyway, I got to know some of these hybrids, and they were absolutely wonderful people. I was very privileged. I felt a huge blessing in being able to know them. And since then, I've just met quite a number of people, through the counseling, through the regressions, or in these experiencer groups who identify themselves as hybrids. So I've had reason to learn as much as I can about that. And then along about 2014, I began getting emails from a man whom I did not know in England. His name is Miguel Mendonça. And Miguel was very interested in the ET human hybrids, as we were calling them at that time. And he would call now and then and ask me what more I was learning about the hybrids who were living on Earth. And by the spring of 2015, he said, "You know some hybrids, I don't. You could maybe introduce me to some hybrids, and you know a lot more about it than I do. Let's collaborate and write a book," which we did. So we interviewed people for several hours, and then again, a few weeks later, several additional hours, and got their whole stories, came to know them, respect them, love them very, very much. And out of all of that, we wrote the book called Meet the Hybrids, which is published in 2015. And it's still a book which is sought by people who experience the star beings and who wonder about their connections with them and wonder if they have some of that lineage in them. And indeed, many, many people do. I think there are probably far more hybrids from the star beings living on Earth, all over the Earth, than we know. And maybe we will never know. So anyway, they are just excellent, excellent beings, and we are very privileged to have them. So the hybrids I know who are living on Earth are created basically in two major different ways. One is that eggs are taken from the human mother and sperm is taken from the human father, or in some cases we found out it might be sperm taken from another man who might have qualities and characteristics that are more appropriate for the being they are creating than the actual Earth father. So the eggs from the mother, the sperm from the father or another man, are taken on board, mixed together, and added into that is the genetic material of not only one being, but typically more than one being. The hybrids in the book, Meet the Hybrids, all had at least 4 different species of extraterrestrials. Some of them have had more species than that mixed in with their genetics. So anyway, this embryo is created and the mother is taken for another occasion on board, and that embryo is implanted into her uterus. So then very soon she discovers, living her life here on Earth, oh, she's pregnant. And that can happen sometimes even if she has not been together with a man for a long, long time. So in some cases, it's very puzzling. I don't know how I could be pregnant. And in some cases, they're in a relationship with a husband. And so it's not a surprise that they're pregnant. Maybe they hadn't planned to be, but anyway, they know that's perfectly possible. So anyway, that baby, that embryo develops into a fetus, and that fetus is carried full term and given birth to here on Earth the regular way that we give birth to all of our babies. And that baby grows up here with that family from infancy, develops along with other babies and children, goes through the school system, the whole social system, maybe a religious system, everything like regular children do. And then there's another way too, that these hybrids living on Earth are created. I found out in my research, and that is that the human mother is already pregnant. She knows she's pregnant, and along about 5 or 6 months into the pregnancy, she is taken on board. She usually would not be consciously aware of that, but that comes out sometimes in dreams or little flashbacks, or certainly the details come out in regressions. So what happens is that when she's taken on board and put on a medical type table, there's always a female being standing by her left side for some reason. And that being feels the abdomen, locates where the fetus is, and then takes what looks to us like a hypodermic type needle and injects DNA from that species and perhaps 2 or 3 other species too, injects that extraterrestrial DNA through the wall of the abdomen, through the wall of the uterus, and into the fetus directly. And then that fetus is considered to be hybridized. In one case, there was a woman who was carrying twins in her womb. And the being on board the ship, the female, was feeling the abdomen, went over where one of the twins was, and paused over where the other twin was in the uterus, and said, "Ah, this is the one we want." And that is the fetus that she injected with the extraterrestrial DNA. That is the one who became hybridized. And he, from the moment of birth right on through, was very, very different than the fraternal twin brother. That happened also, by the way, with Cynthia Crawford, that she was very, very different right from the get-go, right from birth, very different than her twin sister. So that's very interesting, almost like they weren't even sisters at all. So that was the second way of creating these hybrids who live with us on Earth. So some of these hybrids, most of them, all of the ones that I have met, actually, they do look very, very human. And they are raised here totally as a human person. But sometimes they have different physiological features to some extent, features that are not necessarily readily discernible by other people, but they're necessarily are there. Anyway, Cynthia, one of the hybrids, had thumbs that really splayed out at the end, which turned out to be very convenient and helpful for all the sculptural work that she did in making replicas of many of the star beings. Another person had a whole different bone consistency, really different than the rest of us humans. Another, one of the men hybrids in our study had an extra organ. We didn't ever really know, nor did he, what that extra organ was for. And another one of the men in our study, hybrids, he had one of the organs that's usually in the lower abdomen. In his case, it was in the upper abdomen, and well, in the chest area. And yet it was okay, seemed to be perfectly functional. Another one had an extra rib. Still another hybrid had another extra vertebrate. And some of them have unusual blood types. And that is something that they might find out more likely, or if they'd had an X-ray, they could find about the extra rib and the extra vertebrate and so forth. And some of them have weaker muscles, so they cannot participate in sports as vigorously, or in some cases, they don't participate in sports at all. So these species who have been part of the hybrids whom I know, the species are quite numerous. Anyway, these species have given a portion of their genetics to these hybrids living here on Earth. Well, of course, we have Pleiadians who have given their genetics. We also have gray beings, and the gray beings are of various types, various shades of gray and various heights. In other words, it seems like sort of subspecies within the overall species of gray beings. Some of them are maybe 5'7" or 5'8", and some of them have more of a brownish skin tone. Some have more of a bluish gray skin tone. Also, we have DNA given from blue Arcturians and from Sirians, that is from Sirius A and Sirius B. We have genetics given by Andromedans and by tall white Zetas and by mantis beings, even though mantis beings are so incredibly different from our point of view than we are in physiology and height and looks and everything, but they still can give their genetics. Some of their excellent qualities are given to humans who are hybrids. And then there are reptilians. Now, again, with reptilians, it turns out that there are quite a number of different subspecies of reptilians within that overall category. And the reptilians who give their DNA to these hybrids are of the really benevolent, peaceful type. And the hybrids whom I know, who have a good portion of reptilian in them, they do not look reptilian, they look fully human, but they really highly regard that aspect of them that is reptilian. And they have a sense of loving the reptilian beings whose genetics they have. That may be a surprise to some people to hear that. And there are Alpha Centaurians who have contributed their DNA. They're also feline-looking beings. They have a regular physical, upright type of body, but their faces are much more cat-like, feline-like. And then there are Lyran beings and tall white beings, Orion beings. There also are aquatic beings who live on a very, very watery planet, almost like dolphins in a way, but they have 2 arms and 2 legs, and they can be in the water and they can be out of the water perfectly well. But that's very interesting. There's a Zuma Zeta aqua type of race that has donated some of their genetics to some of the hybrids. And there are races that most of us have probably not heard of. There's the Pegasian race that gave genetics to one of the hybrids in the book, and Quabar beings, which is like a combination of a grouping of beings which call themselves Quabar, but different species all combined together, like sort of in one big lump, one big being. And then there are Atvian beings too. So according to one of the hybrids, Jujuli Quito, wonderful, wonderful woman, who has a lot of reptilian in her, by the way, and is very happy about that. She has said from her association with the beings that there are 89 different species of beings who have given their DNA to various hybrids. So there are many commonalities between these hybrids on Earth. And I want to emphasize that, again, I am talking from the point of view of what we on Earth have come to know about hybrids. I'm not coming from the point of view that so many of the speakers this weekend so eloquently, beautifully spoke about, because those are the hybrids themselves, and they can speak for their own experiences. So I'm sort of grounding this into what can we know as humans, for the most part, about hybrids. So, as I said before, each hybrid living here on Earth is born of a human mother on Earth, go through a normal birth. The pediatricians, obstetricians think that that's a perfectly normal baby, and they look human. They look adorable, like our babies do. They're not creepy looking at all. And each one became a hybrid in a slightly different way. One of them, Jujuli, did not become a hybrid until she was 6 years old. And then she was taken on board and injected with a combination of different species of extraterrestrials' DNA. And but that she was the only one of the hybrids whom we got to know really well, who had the hybridization happen in that particular way. And each of them didn't know for sure that they were hybrids until they were pretty much adult. Late in their teenage years, or maybe earlier in their 20s. Cynthia didn't even find out until she was age 35. But anyway, they found out usually after many, many years of wondering about themselves, why they seemed to be so different than everybody they knew, including their own family. But eventually they found out from the beings who had given their genetics to the person that they were hybridized. And in every case of the people we got to know really well, once the person realized, oh, I'm a hybrid, oh, I'm so relieved. Relieved because suddenly their whole life and their experiences made sense, because they had always felt from the very earliest awarenesses in life, they had always felt really different than any other human beings around them. And they always had a different perspective on life, even at those very early ages. They saw human behavior in a whole different way. They just couldn't understand why anybody would be mean to somebody else or mean to an animal. They couldn't understand people shooting each other and killing each other and taking people and harming them. They couldn't understand why so many people participate in war. Well, these are all concerns that we can all wonder about. But these people, these hybrids, particularly were sensitive about that. It just couldn't accept it, couldn't get it, that fellow humans would do that kind of behavior, and in such a broad way all over the world. And they also felt many challenges in living here. They felt that it's so dense here. And whenever they would talk about that with their families or with anybody, gee, it's just so dense here. It's just an effort to move around. Nobody ever knew what they were talking about, because we're all used to the density here on Earth in this dimension. It seems perfectly normal to us, and we adapt to it early on. But these hybrid people really, really had an issue with that. And each of these hybrids expressed that they didn't really feel that their biological family was their real family. Hybrid after hybrid has expressed, I always felt like my real parents were somehow out there in space, and that my real parents were perfectly nice and cared for me, and I appreciated that, and I had love for them, but I didn't feel they were my real people. And my brothers and my sisters aren't my real people. And then it was so frustrating because they had this strong sense, but they didn't know who their real family was or where in the cosmos they were. But they frequently, very frequently, had a sense of going outside and looking up at the sky as if looking for where their home and their true family could be. This seemed to be a quality that was shared by all other ones I came to know. And some of them were aware of their ET lineage as time went on, particularly if they had regressions. They would find out about the different species of star beings that they had been themselves in previous lifetimes. That was very interesting to discover those things. Each one of these hybrids seems to have star being guides, and they consider these guides their star family, and they get many, many messages, many warnings, maybe directions, suggestions, inspirations from these guides. And also they have spirit guides as well. And sometimes it's a little bit fuzzy, trying to determine, oh, is that message coming from my spirit guide or from my star being guide? But they always get really wonderful guidance, and in some cases, out and out protection physically as they're living their lives here. And they all seem to have plenty of visits. Some people call them abductions. Some people call them encounters. Some people call them experiences. I tend to call them encounters or experiences and not use the word abduction, because so many of these experiences turn out to be very benevolent. And some of them turn out to be exceedingly loving. Some of the encounters with the other beings turn out to be more self-serving on the part of the beings, but they turn out to be not deliberately mean or torturous. The more we look into it in regressions, there always are perfectly justified reasons why any of these beings take human beings for these experiences, I have found. And there are many, many, many different reasons why the different beings do take people for these experiences. So most of these hybrids, as I've said, are a mixture of different experiences and so of different beings. So when they are taken for experiences with one of the groups of beings, their experiences with them might be quite different than when they are taken for experiences with one of the other species. So any one hybrid, whom I know, could have quite a variety of beings they have visits with, and procedures and teachings and trainings that are done by this variety of beings. So Other commonalities of these beings is that they have very great sensitivity to different frequencies. And even here on Earth, we have a tremendous variety of frequencies. And some people are just much more attuned to that than others. Some people can walk into a room and immediately pick up the frequency, the mood of everyone in the room. And they can pick up the frequency when they come across a new person. And with picking up of the frequency, they can know a lot about that person because they are very psychic and very telepathic. So they can experience different people, different places, different situations, much more than most human beings can. I know a woman right now who's going through the ascension process and receiving tremendous downloads of energy from higher sources. And those energies are so different than what she's used to living her whole life here on Earth. She's in her middle age years now, and she's really having quite a challenge adjusting to that. But she's trusting that it's an expanding, a growing, a developing in consciousness and even of her physical body. But her body is really being challenged by that. So these hybrids also are very empathic. They can be with an animal or with a person and feel what that animal or what that person is feeling. So if they come across a person who has a headache, they themselves feel that headache or a stomach distress or a backache or whatever it is. So sometimes they have to make a point of removing themselves from being with groups of people because they're just picking up too much, which is not really their own distress, but they are empathically feeling it. They're also empathetic, which means that they really care about the other people and about what the people are experiencing. These hybrid beings also have a whole variety of special skills, as these people who were speaking here this weekend as hybrids, as they have certainly wonderfully indicated. They have a great grouping of psychic skills and are very keen on intuition, about reading people, about suddenly knowing things, about predicting things that are going to be happening. And very, very often they are totally accurate in those predictions. They have the ability of telepathy. And sometimes they claim that when they're little and they know what everybody around them is thinking, and they mention what a person is thinking, that person is shocked and offended and feels invaded. And the poor little hybrid child doesn't know why. What did I do? What's wrong with that? Of course I know what you're thinking. And they assume that everybody else knows what they're thinking, even though they don't. But anyway, that is really quite a developed skill that many of them have. They also have a variety of physical healing skills. Some of them do Reiki healing. Some of them do color and sound healing. Some of them do light language healing. Some of them do hands-on healing. Some do remote healing, sending healing over great distances to people who need it. Some of them, like Jacqueline Smith, do wonderful animal communication, very accurate communication, and animal clairvoyance. And they can even trace where lost animals are. And they can tell a pet owner what the distress seems to be with his cat or his dog, who seems to be distressed about something. That is a very helpful skill And many families who have beloved pets are getting helped in that particular way with these hybrids who have that ability. They also have the ability to do a lot of astral travel, out of body experiences. Many of us do as well, but that's one of their skills. Some of them even have the skill of bilocation. They can be two places just as effectively at the same time. Some of the more rare ones actually can do multi-location, a few places at the same time. And also, many of these hybrids are teaching regular human people to heal themselves. They can heal them, and they teach people to heal themselves, because those peoples may not be near a healer when they need that sort of help. And they also, many of them have this marvelous ability, as we have seen with some of the people this weekend, of channeling higher beings, bringing through really inspiring, educating messages from these higher beings, from the star beings, and from beings in many different dimensions, which are helping us to understand reality, expanding our perspective, helping us to grow and develop. And some of them make a point of channeling or doing medium work with deceased persons and even deceased animals, deceased pets in particular. And some of these hybrids have the experiences now and then of shape-shifting into the form of one of the beings whose DNA they have. So I know 3 people who are hybrids who actually shape into their reptilian form of being. And they really enjoy it. Their intention, their will to create all kinds of things, good things. And so each of the 3 of them has expressed how happy, how proud they are when they have an experience for a few minutes, or in some cases, several hours, of being the reptilian aspect of their being. So Cynthia Crawford, one of the hybrids, was sharing a room with Jujuli at a conference, Jujuli being one of the other hybrids in our book. And Cynthia came in later in the evening to their bedroom one night and looked over at Juju. And there Jujuli was in bed with the covers over, but looking totally reptilian. Her whole body shape was reptilian instead of the slim human being that she actually is. And yet her face gave a real familiar sense of looking like Jujuli. So Cynthia, being very comfortable about her shifting into her reptilian form and really having enjoyed shifting into her reptilian form herself, she was perfectly okay with that. So she turned off the light and went to bed. And when they both woke up in the morning, Jujuli looked like she was back in her full human self. And when Cynthia asked her about that, were you aware of being a reptilian? And Ju said, oh, I had the most vivid dream that I was my reptilian self. It was a wonderful dream. I really had a good time. She hadn't realized that her whole body had shifted into that particular form, but she did experience it through the dream. And Charmaine, another one of these wonderful hybrids who lives in England, she had wondered for years and years and years why she experienced life so differently than anybody else, even her own family seemed to experience it. Why she was so different. She looked really beautiful, like a beautiful human being. Lovely lady, lovely personality. But anyway, she wondered and wondered why she experienced things so differently, felt so differently. And finally, at about age 20, she had the experience of morphing, shape-shifting into her reptilian form, her whole body, totally reptilian for an hour or two. And she was so relieved because that answered the question for her of why she felt so different than everybody else, even though she normally didn't look different than everybody else except prettier. So that was wonderful. And then she began to have more conscious contact, as well as contact during her sleep at night, with the reptilian beings and the other beings whose genetics that she has. And she was learning, and still is, more and more about that. She, by the way, has taken on her special mission to help other people who are hybrids to recognize that they are hybrids. She also does counseling and support groups and healing, but she considers her main reason for being here as a hybrid is to detect who among the people she meets and hears about might be hybrids, and meets with them, discusses this all with them. And if they are hybrids, she helps them to identify that they are hybrids and put all those pieces together that they have been wondering about. So she's, in a sense, building a hybrid community over there in England, which is a really wonderful thing. And then Robert, one of the hybrids in Meet the Hybrids, he did not exactly change into a mantis being. However, he had lots of mantis DNA in his genetics, and he had lots and lots of contacts with the mantis beings. And he really liked the mantis beings, had a wonderful rapport with them, a feeling of closeness. And there was a period of time several years ago when he experienced the feeling here on Earth of being stretched like we stretch when we are growing. Now, the only thing is that he was feeling this in a very painful way, like we have growing pains in our legs. I can remember that when I was growing up, and many people can. So he was being stretched not only in his legs, but all over his body, stretched more into his tall, thin mantis form. But finally, it was just getting to be too much. He just couldn't stand it. And he told the beings, please, please, please stop. I can't take it. I want to be close to you, but I don't want to be turned into one of you while I'm living here on Earth. It's just not workable, and it hurts too much. So each hybrid has a helpful guide, and the guides might be part of the person's star family, or it might not. And each hybrid might have a mixture of guides. Sometimes the guides are what we call extraterrestrial star family, or some of them might be more like angelic celestial beings. Some of the guides might be members of the hybrid's own star family groups. Sometimes the guides might be living here as other human beings, but human beings who are particularly tuned in to the uniqueness of this person who is a hybrid. And sometimes people's guides are animals, and particularly those hybrids who have great skills in animal communications. Of course, we know of many indigenous groups like the Native Americans, for instance, that have animal totems and feel that their guides are a particular animal. So each hybrid has his own particular unique sense of conscious connection with his or her own guide and her own star family. Sometimes they actually ask for help from their guides, and sometimes their guides initiate contact. Sometimes they offer assistance or offer healing and go about doing that. Sometimes they will just drop in ideas, inspirations, instructions in some cases. And some hybrids are much more in touch regularly, consciously with their guides than others. With others, it seems to be more of just sort of an overall amalgamation of, communication, inspiration coming from their guides. And of course, they say that we humans all have guides, and we can all ask for contact. We can all ask for help when we need it. We can ask for guidance. And it is said again and again by many people who know about this, that our guides are so aware of us, even if we're not at all aware of them. And they're very caring about us, very perceptive about us. They know our thoughts, they know our feelings, and they want to be asked for help, because that's why they're there, to help us in various ways. And we are cautioned to ask wisely, not for just frivolous things. Oh, let me have a chocolate milkshake, please. Not frivolous things, but when it really matters, they want us to ask, and they are right at the ready, willing to help. And they help in so many ways. I have been amazed myself in some of the miraculous seeming things that have happened that I know were orchestrated by my guides, or they just could not have happened. So the hybrids I know are goodwill ambassadors for their extraterrestrial species, goodwill ambassadors between those beings and humanity. What a wonderful mission that is. They consider themselves to be bridges between us humans and their species. They're here to let us know about the other beings. I think it's probably true that even nowadays, with so much information out there in the public, in movies and television programs and movies, radio programs, even on the internet, etc., that there's much more information worldwide about extraterrestrial beings. But even then, there are probably many, many people in the world, billions maybe, who don't even pay any attention to this. They don't believe it, like I didn't believe it, really, truly, until 1981, when I regressed my first experiencer, and gradually became totally convinced of the reality of the other beings and our relationship with them. But many, many people don't really know or believe about this whole incredible aspect of reality, much more huge than our little human on Earth part of reality. So many of them are here to educate other people about the star being reality. And they are here to preserve and to enhance human life. And they do that through many ways. They help us to raise our frequencies. They've got many different ways of doing that, some of which we have experienced this weekend. They are here to expand our human consciousness. They are here to help us to evolve in a finer way of life, a finer raised consciousness. And they are here to help us to ascend into a higher dimension. This big process going on. They are one of the great assistants in this whole process of helping us in that ascension and into preparing for ascension. Probably it's true to say that most people all over the world, of the 8 billion or whatever we are nowadays, don't know about the process of ascension. And then there are many people who do know, and many people who consider themselves involved in it. Anyway, overall, through all of their teaching, their public speaking, their writing, they're getting the messages out in various ways. They are helping humanity to be aware that we have the opportunity to ascend, and that even the earth has the opportunity and is in the process of ascending. So they know us as beings who are, in many cases, doing the best we can, but we're kind of low on the ladder of evolution compared to many of the other star beings. And they want us to evolve enough as a total humanity to be part of the great galactic federation, which is made up of many, many, many different species and groups of star beings from all over the cosmos. And there are certain species of beings that are not allowed to be part of that galactic federation. For instance, the beings who are more self-serving, they are considered renegade, and they are not allowed to be part of that galactic federation. We are not allowed to either, because our consciousness is much too low, and there's too much belligerence and aggressiveness and warlikeness going on, selfishness, greed, etc. So there's no way we could possibly be part of that federation at this point. But the hybrids are here to help us to evolve enough that we can belong to that group in the future. So these hybrids are here totally to give benevolent service to fellow humans. And they do this in very modest ways too, by teaching classes, by holding workshops, by guiding individual people, by guiding groups of people, by physically healing people, including remote healing, by counseling individual people, helping them put together the pieces of their lives and clear up things that really need to be released, and finding their own purpose in life. Everybody feels better, it seems. All of us humans feel better when we feel like we're carrying out our purpose in life. Some people don't even feel that they have a purpose in life. But if they can find it, whatever that is, and if they can get in gear with it and be carrying it out, they are so much more rewarded internally, so much more satisfied with their lives. So these hybrids are really special also in the way that they don't need any fanfare, any fame. They don't need to be in the spotlight. Sometimes they come into the spotlight, such as at this conference this weekend, and that's fine, but that's not what they're here to do primarily. And they just go about their work in regular, quiet ways. And some of them, because of our technology nowadays, are being able to be more effective to a larger audience because they can use the internet. They can be on YouTube. They can have their own channel. They can have their own websites. They can disseminate a lot of information to a wider group of people because of the internet. So this is wonderful that it's coming along right with the existence of human ET hybrids on Earth, giving them more of a platform for sharing information, for letting us know about them than we would have otherwise. So many of them have expressed that they feel more extraterrestrial, more star being than they feel like humans. And yet they are living here as a human among other humans. So I'd like to just mention a couple of other services they do. Some of them do life coaching and from a higher point of view. Sometimes they give nutritional advice, which can help their clients living here on Earth. Some of them do a lot of channeling, and they are bringing forth not only a lot of information about various aspects of reality, but very often they bring through guidance for the specific people they're working with. And so a lot of them do listening and counseling with people. And the people who go to them gradually come to feel, oh, that's wonderful. I can say anything about the peculiar things I'm wondering about that nobody else I know wonders about, or the unusual skills I seem to have, or my larger frame of reference that I wonder about, or those strange things that are happening to me in the middle of the night sometimes, waking up and seeing other unusual beings there. I mean, what's that? What's going on? So they help people in a variety of ways, and they help people to enlarge their spiritual understanding about reality. They give them sometimes what they call angel attunements, tuning up their consciousness, tuning up their frequencies, tuning up their heart center so they can be more loving. So it just goes on and on. Some of them even do Akashic record readings for the people who come to them. Sometimes they will even create or inspire other people to create wonderful technologies, like healing technologies that we haven't had here on Earth, and many of us have longed for. So these are just some of their wonderful services. So I would like to say that overall, these hybrids are here to educate humans to be aware of the reality of the star beings, helping us to accept the presence of ETs, star beings, when they come to Earth, and they will be coming more to Earth. They're helping to educate us to receive extraterrestrial knowledge and assistance, and to bring forth new extraterrestrial technologies to help our life here on Earth, and to emphasize the importance of helping the Earth's environment, the whole climate change, the whole environmental issue, which is so huge, so going on. And they're helping humans to connect with the star beings, not as an enemy, not to fear them, but to connect with them with a peaceful unification. And the opportunities for this, they say, will be coming more and more frequently for us to do that. So they're helping humans to evolve into a greater, higher consciousness and into more psychic awareness, more spiritual awareness. They're helping us to overcome the limitations of our physicality, which many of us have felt we're totally constricted by that. There's nothing more to us than our physicality, but they're helping to stretch the parameters for many of us to realize we have abilities that we haven't even known that we have. And that's a wonderful thing. They're helping us to become more spiritually aware. They're helping us to become more comfortable with the whole reality of multidimensionality. I think most people probably think only of the third dimension as being the only dimension in reality. Maybe some of them hope for or have a little sense of somehow consciousness goes on after physical death. But I would imagine that most people in the world in general just think this is it, physical reality. And yet, some of us know that is only one aspect of actual reality. So they are really inspiring us and educating us in many, many ways. And some of these hybrids are actually being spokespeople for these star beings. And it's kind of like they're being public relations agents for the star beings, letting us know about them. And they let people know about this in their public speaking, in their channeling, in their published writings, in their podcasts. More and more podcasts are coming online now, and more interviews of people who know about this, like myself and many of you. And they help us to understand cosmic knowledge. They also are here to help us, people, to feel safe when we will ever maybe have the opportunity of leaving Earth with the extraterrestrials. That is, if life here on Earth becomes more and more difficult and more impossible, we may, as great masses of people, being lifted onto crafts and taken elsewhere to another planet to live. And of course, it's all to the better if people are already aware of them and the goodness of many of those beings and the intent for them to really help us so that we won't resist such a process of being taken elsewhere. The beings are also bringing, through the hybrids, bringing universal symbols from the cosmic language, acquainting humans with that, as we have seen with Jacqueline and some of the others, and Vivian, and the star languages, the star symbols that they give some of you. It's really wonderful. Every single one of those symbols really raises our consciousness. And that reminds me to say that another great lifelong love of mine is the crop circle phenomenon, which is full of symbols. I've researched it personally for 27 years. And the crop circles, each one that is a genuine one, that is not a man-made one, each one is a symbol. Each one is an activator. Each one that we see, even see just a picture of. And of course, for those of us who go into a lot of them, it has a real effect on our consciousness and even on our DNA. So we on Earth are being given symbols again and again. And crop circles are happening, even if few and far between, in most of the countries in the world, maybe even all of the countries, even if the pattern is laid down in the sand or the dirt or the grass or a rocky plain or just plain dirt or ice or water. These symbols, which we see mostly in crops and call them crop circles, these symbols are given by the higher beings. And it's going on year after year after year, becoming more complex, more beautiful, more meaningful, more symbolic. We are just being gifted tremendously by the crop circles and by the hybrids and other star beings. So that's a concluding thought that I have, with many thanks and many blessings to all the beings, all the hybrids who are here doing their good work and inspiring us so much. And let's all of us in this audience try to let other people we know in our regular lives to know about these wonderful beings whom we are calling hybrids. And God bless them. God bless us all. And thank you very much.